All right, and we're live. You're listening to Interchain FM, the Cosmos radio station. You're watching a series called the Interchain Jam on the Cosmos dedicated channel. If you are seeking alpha in the Cosmos, look no further. I'm your host, Chango and Chain, and today we are here with Wormhole Gateway. So we're here with Nikhil. Sorry, I might be mispronouncing that a little bit. Nikhil Suri, the product lead at Wormhole, as well as Robinson Berkey, the head of strategy at Wormhole Foundation. Why don't we start with your backgrounds? Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, Nikhil, go ahead. Start us off.
Yeah, thanks. Super excited to be here. Super excited about Wormhole Gateway and entering the Cosmos ecosystem. Quick background on me. I've been working on Wormhole for about a year now. Originally before I joined the foundation, was working at Jump Crypto and been involved in crypto for on and off for several years. I got involved originally in college with some interop projects that I was pretty excited about. And then post-college, went to big tech for a couple of years and now back in it, which I'm pretty excited about.
Cool.
Yeah, and for myself, I've been in kind of the, go-to-market startup space for about a decade or so. Joined and helped scale a number of startups that didn't work until ultimately I found one that did with a company called DoorDash. Was there for a while. At the same time I was there in about 2017, I got into mining Ethereum when that was still a thing. And that kind of was my entryway into wanting to know more, learn more about this space we all spend a lot of time in, crypto. And so after that, I ended up joining the Polkadot ecosystem, so another app chain ecosystem, to help scale an app chain called Akala, which was a DeFi specific chain, and worked with Wormhole on the Akala integration. We're actually one of the chains within the Wormhole network that Wormhole connected to. And after I left Akala, wanted to continue to stay in the interoperability space and came on board the team.
Awesome. I'm just going to get right into it. If you're here, if you are Jump, how does one recover from a $325 million bridge hack aside from bankroll limit?
Wow, we're going to start off with hard questions. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yep, rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes, there's no secret that there was a hack. I think there's the bridging space has been notorious for them for the past few years. They're pretty popular attack vector. But Wormhole is fortunate enough to have a core contributor, Jump Crypto, that to Django's point did plug the hole the next day. And I think that speaks volumes, at least from the perspective of making users whole. I think there's a lot of time in this industry where users are kind of the ones left holding the bag. But the actual plugging of the hole isn't what's important, at least as important now. It's everything we've done since then to become more secure. When we think about bridges and interoperability, the biggest value prop you can provide is security. I'd say the other two are being everywhere and being easy to use for developers. But security has been our core focus since the hack a while back. And we'll get into some of those security features today, which is why we launched Wormhole Gateway. But I oftentimes kind of give this analogy to put it in perspective. We want to build Wormhole and if you've ever seen the movie Harry Potter, like Voldemort, right? There's 6 things you have to kill before you can actually kill Voldemort. And I think that's how we think about Wormhole Bridge today. We put in a number of core security features that would prevent anything like what happened to happen again. And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. And I like to focus on that because I think everyone can kind of say we've had countless audits, which we have. But what are the things we've baked into the protocol to make sure users are safe using it? That's important.
Right. Audits are good for giving people a feeling of security, but they're not a catch-all, as we clearly understand, right? Because the hacks continue to happen. I'm interested in understanding what are those security measures that you alluded to. But before we get into that, help the audience understand what exactly happened with the original bridge hack. And as I understand it, it happened on the Solana side. So, is it okay? First of all, Nikhil, I'm interested in knowing what happened on the Solana side. And moreover, is it true that the more ecosystems you're connected to, where if one side of the ecosystem like Solana or another chain that you're connected to is hacked, is it pathological for the entire Wormhole network?
Yeah, totally. So to answer the second question first, no, today, because of Wormhole Gateway and the security features that adds, it is not existential risk for the entire Wormhole network if a single chain, if a single L1 like Solana is hacked. And we can get into how exactly those security features work in just a sec. But going into the Solana hack, the problem that happened on Solana was that there was a bug in the smart contract that was deployed to Solana that allowed an attacker to craft fake wormhole messages and get them to be verified. So as for those who don't know, I'm sure you know, Django, the way Wormhole works is it's a multi-sig bridge. We have 19 guardians who attest to all messages that are passing through Wormhole. Those 19 guardians are 19 of the biggest validator companies that are out there, run nodes on lots of different chains. Running nodes is their business. And when 13 out of 19 of those guardians, or in other words, 2/3 of the guardians sign a Wormhole message, then that message can be submitted to its destination chain where it'll be verified. The signatures on that message will be verified, and then that'll determine that it's a valid message. And so the bug on Solana was a bug in our signature verification logic on Solana. Going back to the security features, though, we have a couple of security features that we've added that protect us against existential bridging risk. The first one is what we call the accountant, and that is live and running today on Wormhole Gateway. The accountant is a ledger that keeps track of all the transactions that are going from one chain to another chain. And so if there is an existential risk on one chain, let's say one chain's validator set gets hacked and someone can mint infinite Wormhole funds on that chain, the attacker won't actually be able to use Wormhole to bridge out more than what's been bridged in because of the global accountant enforcement. So that's the first security feature. The second security feature that protects us against existential bridging risks or just large hacks in general is called the governor. And the governor limits the amount of value that can be bridged out of an ecosystem within a 24-hour sliding window. And so obviously that limit is different for different chains depending on how long those chains have been around for. ETH, the limit is super high because we know that ETH is a very safe chain. For newer chains, the limit is usually lower because they're a little more untested. But the governor makes sure that if there is let's say, even if there's a big hack on ETH, let's say for a project on ETH, and someone attempts to bridge out a huge value transaction from ETH, the governor has a daily limit and it also has a large transaction limit. So it'll hold up any single transaction that's above the large transaction limit for review by the Wormhole guardians. So a lot of info there, but those are two of the main security features that we've added since the hack that protect us.
And what is that threshold?
For different chains, it's different again. So for the governor limits, I think the daily 24-hour limit on Ethereum is something like 50 million. Robinson, correct me if I'm wrong. And the big transaction limit on Ethereum is somewhere around 5 million or 10 million.
Yeah, and that's all voted on. Like if you want to increase the risk ceiling, let's say on the governor, that's voted on by the Guardian network, which is the proof of authority validator network that Nikhil alluded to earlier.
Yeah, so it's voted on by the Guardians, and if a chain, typically we launch a new chain with a pretty low governor limit, just because, as I said, it's untested. But if that chain is seeing high volume and there's a need to increase those limits, we start a public discussion on GitHub. The Guardians weigh in. People share data on on the transactions that are going through, how much notional USD value is flowing through the chain, flowing in and out. And then the Guardians vote on whether to raise the limits. And then we raise the limits and roll out the new release.
Understood. Is it true then that the original wormhole hack was constrained to only the amount of money that was bridged in from Solana, and it didn't touch the other assets that Wormhole also custodied?
So because we didn't have global accountant protections, the original
so 325 was the whole pot of what
it wasn't the whole pot of what was in Wormhole, but the whole pot was at risk. Now with the protections that we've added, the whole pot is no longer at risk. Only the amount that's been bridged in is at risk.
Only the amount that's been bridged in for all of the integrated chains, or are these pots segregated to each destination or source and destination?
The amount of value that's been bridged in is based off of the tokens that have been bridged in, and so
okay, so it's not a function of if it comes from the Cosmos hub and someone's trying to transfer it to Ethereum, that's not a segregated pot from someone bridging out of Solana into Avalanche or whatever. It's more a function of each token, like USDC.
It's a function of each token, yeah.
I see. Okay. Okay, so right, if someone were to hack your USDC pot, then they could, in theory, draw all of the custodied USDC that Wormhole has.
Yeah,
up to the threshold.
Not all of. Go ahead, Nico.
Sorry, I was going to say not all of so let's say that let's say that the amount, just to nail this down, let's say the amount of USDC that's been bridged into Solana is 500,000, and someone is able to produce fake USDC on Solana via some sort of hack. They would only be able to bridge out 500,000 of the fake USDC because it's limited by how much of each token has gone into Wormhole or has gone into Solana via Wormhole. If that makes sense.
So how much time in units of blocks does it take Wormhole Guardians to figure out that they've just signed a message allowing the transfer of fake USDC?
How much time in Wormhole blocks?
No, in number of blocks. Well, okay.
On the destination chain?
Let's just hypothetically imagine that that attack has occurred and fake USDC has been minted on Solana, and then they bridged 500k USDC worth out onto a destination chain, let's say Ethereum. And then they've like transferred it to, let's say, a centralized exchange or something to try to off ramp in that time. So basically, what I'm asking is, how long does it take Wormhole's security measures to figure out that there's been a hack? And is there any way to
the global accountant? Yeah, the global accountant.
So basically the way that it works is the global accountant runs for every transfer before the guardians sign those transfers. So the global accountant maintains balances and runs for every single transfer, and those balances change on every single transfer. So I guess there are a couple of things I should mention here. The first thing I'd mention is if someone were to do what you just said, mint fake USDC and then bridge it out, it would pass the accountant because it would pass the accountant up to the accountant's balance that is on that chain. And then after it exceeds the accountant's balance, those transfers would be blocked. And
would there not be a red flag raised if someone tried to transfer out more than what exists based on the accountant's knowledge on a source chain?
Yeah, so exactly, the accountant would stop that transfer, and that transfer,
like atomically or would they say, oh, okay,
atomic, like it would stop it in its tracks. So that transfer, the accountant checks run by the guardians independently of smart contracts on all the chains that Wormhole is connected to. The accountant checks run before guardians sign any message. So 13 guardians independently run the accountant checks before they independently sign the messages. Now there's one more. Now the governor also can come into play here as well, because if an attacker tries to bridge out a huge amount of notional value from a chain, even if it's within the accountant limits, that transfer would get held up because of the governor rules. And then there's a third protection as well, which is that if let's say a project gets hacked, but they don't bridge out using Wormhole or any other bridges yet, we have a security team that's on this. Wormhole contributors are very sort of active and aware of like what's going on Twitter. Like typically we hear about hacks of projects really, really fast. And oftentimes our security team is also like pulled into the war room for a lot of these hacks to help the protocols resolve the hacks. And typically attackers don't bridge out immediately after hacks. They'll like hack and then maybe 10 minutes later, they might try transactions to bridge out, right? The guardians can also vote to shut down the Wormhole contract or Wormhole functionality on a certain L1. So if guardians sign off on it, they can pass governance to shut down a Wormhole contract on a certain bridge. And that also protects Wormhole from any bridging risk due to hacks.
All right. So they have some emergency governance circumvention scheme that can happen within a matter of under 24 hours in order to take these security measures.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about Gateway, which is what, I believe Robinson unleashed at OsmoCon in Paris this last summer. Talk about Gateway and what is it going to support?
Yeah. I think Nikhil just talked a lot about security features, which is core to why we launched Gateway, Wormhole Gateway. I think about three main things though. Is number one, the most important one is the security features. And then I guess number 2 and 3 is asset routing and minting. So for us, when we think about entering the Cosmos ecosystem, IBC is also another, I guess you could say, message passing protocol similar to Wormhole. So we could, for instance, connect all these Cosmos chains with the Guardian network and then likely cause some sort of fungibility issues, make it difficult for the builders, make it difficult for the users, or we could establish a hub or a router, which is Gateway, and then have assets flow through there, maintain fungibility, and use IBC tech. So Gateway is essentially our way of bringing assets from all the other ecosystems into Cosmos and back out. And I think a large reason for that is again, to maintain that fungibility, make it easier for builders, make it easier for users, and also asset minting as well. So I know there's a lot of asset minting chains coming up in the Cosmos ecosystem, but that functionality exists with Wormhole Gateway as well.
So I understand how Wormhole could enforce fungibility in its own hub, but how would it do that if Wormhole is one of several bridges that another chain uses to import an asset? Okay,
Yeah,
tangibly, let's say, Osmosis, right? Osmosis has Axelar. It's going to use Wormhole. Maybe there's Noble. Maybe it uses Neutron for staked ETH assets. Then and Wormhole will support the same assets. How is fungibility enforced across the interchain in that sense? In parts where Wormhole does not control. In parts where the Wormhole Guardian network doesn't control.
Yeah, sure. So the way that projects often solve this, and the way that Osmosis will probably solve it, is via liquidity pools. So Osmosis deploys transmuter pools for other assets, and basically we would pool. There would be pools where USDC from Wormhole is pooled together with USDC from Axelar, and potentially even USDC from Noble, if that's another large source of USDC. And then people will be able to swap within that pool, and there'd be deep liquidity in that pool for the various flavors of USDC. Or people would be able to pool their USDC, their flavor of USDC in there. And I think for Osmosis transmuter pools, it mints a synthetic. That's like Osmo USDC, and then Osmo USDC is sort of like the canonical asset that's used on Osmosis with all the other sort of pairs for trading.
Yeah. And these problems aren't Cosmos specific either, right? This is an issue that every chain has to deal with. And for instance, if I'm not ETH, let's say I'm Aptos, ETH can't exist on Aptos. So there's usually some sort of flavor of bridged ETH, and it is beneficial to the builders and the users to largely get behind one. And so you can either kind of choose what Nikhil mentioned, like a canonical version, and kind of push that forward as the standard, which is often a good practice. Or if you're connected to a number of different bridges, then your job as maybe the foundation or the labs entities behind the protocol has to figure out like how you're going to solve that liquidity fragmentation. And I think in the example Nikhil gave, Osmosis is solving that with these pools of all these assets and minting, a synthetic that is used. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways we see protocols try and solve the fungibility issue.
Where do you think the space is headed with these bridges and fungibility, and where it falls on the trade-off spectrum with using one and it becomes this giant honeypot? So for right, like yes, it's true that if most users default to one canonical bridge, it's better for convenience and for fungibility for UX reasons. But also, again, it's that bridge then becomes the honeypot. So then we got to circle back to the question of like, okay, how secure is this thing?
Totally.
But at the same time, it's jump trading your money is safe with Jump, right? They'll just make you whole.
Well, yeah. So I think just to answer the first question, that assumes that bridge technology stays where it is today. And for Wormhole in particular, another thing that's been a huge focus for us on the security roadmap Nikhil mentioned, we hired an entire security team. They don't only focus on Wormhole, and I'll get into where the space is going in a second, but they don't only focus on Wormhole, but they focus on all other ecosystems too, because Wormhole connects all these ecosystems, and we want to make sure that everywhere in crypto we can find bugs, responsibly turn those bugs in and create a safer environment. Some of those in Cosmos, for instance. And so with that team and a few others, we're actually working a lot on not only the security features, but also the way in which we verify messages. So today bridges are on this there's a spectrum of trustlessness. Today you trust these, for Wormhole, you trust these 19, highly reputable validator companies, but that's like on one spectrum of trust, let's say. Where we're going and where we have actively done a lot of work is, and I know this is these two letters are a bit of a buzzword, but is around like ZK verification. So today the Guardians, as Nikhil mentioned, are attesting to a message. They're saying the state on this chain equals the state of this chain. And tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to say, now we have ZK verification. So we have essentially the ZK verifiers attesting to the state of each chain, which is much more secure than the current place we have today. So the one thing to answer your question is that, yes, I agree in today's state, it's a difficult trade-off. If I'm a chain and I'm launching, do I choose 3 bridges? Do I choose, because I want to diversify maybe something happening? Do I choose 1 because I'm optimizing for liquidity fragmentation? I think that decision will get easier over time as bridge technology continues to mature. But I think the decision today is a difficult one. And we've seen chains make different decisions. We've seen some chains choose all the bridges and they have the diversification of security in their mind, but then they have to deal with all these different assets. And then we've seen other bridges, and usually non-EVM bridges, chains choose 1 because it's really important, because a lot of the assets from ETH will be coming to that chain. So you're going to have to choose some sort of canonical version from all the assets from ETH coming to the chain. So the trade-off becomes a little bit more difficult, and they usually go with liquidity fragmentation.
Mm-hmm. Users also need to decide what their trust assumptions are and what they're comfortable with. So if they want a more trusted model where I'm trusting 19 reputable guardians, then maybe I'm comfortable with Wormhole, right? And if I know I want my my stolen assets to be made whole in the future, I know that, okay, Jump is behind it, so maybe I'll use this. Or if I prefer a more trust minimized model, I would use something like Axelar, I suppose. But in this current paradigm, the bridging technology still seems pretty archaic. Do you see a future where blockchains potentially won't need bridges and could speak directly to one another?
It's hard to say. I think anyone who has a commitment on what crypto will look like in 2 years is a false prophet of sorts. But you also hear now more than ever, it's all chains and bridges, right? Let's say the world's built on ETH. It's still chains and bridges. These execution layers need a way to communicate with the settlement layer. So I don't, maybe bridges change the current form, right? Like they could be all ZK verification, multi-sig bridges don't exist. What the actual verification and how that's done could definitely change. But in today's state, it's hard to see a world, even if, let's say, we see consolidation to one ecosystem, which is, probably unlikely. But Nikhil, I don't know if you want to weigh into the vision of
I think
bridges
my opinion is pretty similar. I think it's all chains and bridges all the way down. Even if like a way for one chain to talk to another chain, that is a bridge. You need a message passing protocol, or you need a way to pass messages and verify messages from one chain to another. So I agree with Robinson. What bridges look like might change, but bridges still are going to be a critical component of the entire stack. And also, I think, there needs to be a lot more standardization in these ecosystems. Different VMs keep popping up still. There still is kind of a lack of standardization that makes this native method of one chain talking to another chain it's a beautiful vision, but it's very difficult to actually realize. And unless there's some massive amount of standardization in the way that consensus mechanisms work and execution layers work and validator sets work and things like that, I think that it's going to be very difficult to have a world without any bridges.
Yeah, and just to quickly jump, I know I answered one thing, but I want to touch on the Axelar trust minimized piece. I want to start off by saying I have nothing but respect for anyone that's building in the bridge space, because it's hard. It is a very hard space to build in. But I think when I think about Axelar, I don't think that they are any more trust minimized. I think you're just trusting different parties, and there are different trade-offs with kind of the trust you're putting in. For instance, Axelar was also approved within the Uniswap assessment, which is great, to shuttle cross-chain votes, except there was a condition, and the condition was around core parts of the protocol are governed by a 4 of 8 multisig, for instance. And there are opportunities within a smaller permissionless validator set, and let's say a low market cap token, for there to be a higher chance of an economic attack on the network, right? So this isn't to argue, I think, who's more or less trust minimized. There's different, you just have to understand, and unfortunately for the common user, that's going to be hard to do. But I think it's just different flavors of how you come to consensus and secure different blockchains.
Sure. Let's touch on what you just said about Axelar's the economics of, let's say, Axelar bridging in a smaller market cap token of an untested chain that just launched, and its market cap is 500,000, and then they so they've basically minted all of these coins with a pre-mine at Genesis, and now they're using Axelar to bridge them over to put into a liquidity pool on Osmosis. And then if that chain's deployer or validators are malicious, then they could drain that pool, right? So that's one attack vector from that. So how is Wormhole different?
Yeah, so and Nikhil can probably articulate this better than I can, but we have a permission set of validators. So our consensus is based on proof of authority. So for us, the consensus is a 13 and 19 multisig, and that's the same for all messages throughout the entire ecosystem. And Nikhil can probably add better detail and context than I can on this.
But is there a different process by which they whitelist a new chain to support?
Oh, so you mean what's the process for Wormhole to support a new chain versus Axelar, or what's?
Yeah, because the attack vector I'm talking about is, if a bridge supports an untested app chain with new tokens, and then that app chain becomes turns out it's malicious, and they use that liquidity to drain the pool of on a DEX. So then the attack vector is where it became faulty is when the bridge supported that app chain.
Okay, got it. So I guess what you're saying is so first, I guess for general sort of Wormhole connections, when we support a chain, right? Are you asking how we properly vet chains before we support them, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the typical process for the way that Wormhole connects to a chain is the team needs to, and the guardians need to like agree on expanding to a new chain because it makes sense for the Wormhole network as a whole, the Wormhole ecosystem as a whole. And we only reach agreement on expanding to a new chain, I guess, when we are fairly confident in that new ecosystem. Of course, it's untested, but there needs to be some degree of confidence in that new ecosystem. And then when we support that chain, we deploy smart contracts to that chain. All the security features are aligned for that chain. And so new chain deployments come with the same security that all the existing chain deployments already have. And so I guess if there was a chain that was malicious and no value had been bridged in yet, but they decided to mint a whole bunch of fake tokens on their chain, if they try to mint fake Wormhole tokens, those transfers would get blocked by security checks like the accountant. And if they minted sort of native tokens on their own chain and then tried to bridge those native tokens that they minted to other chains via Wormhole, I think there would be some kind of social consensus where the crypto community, and this is the case for any bridge, where regardless of whether you use Wormhole, Axelar, or some other bridge, the crypto community would probably realize that this is kind of a malicious chain and those tokens are valueless. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that generally applies to how that attack vector is solved. Okay, I'm going to go to a question from the audience. Crypto God asks about the Moonbeam integration.
Yeah, I can speak to that one a little bit. So the analogy I would give for how the Moonbeam integration works is actually very similar to what we've done within Cosmos with Gateway. So Gateway is a router chain, and for Wormhole, instead of taking the approach of everyone uses our messaging and our verification, and we go into these app chain ecosystems and try and replace like their core native, communication layer, if you will, we want to align ourselves with it. So I don't know, Crypto God, how familiar you are with XCM. There's largely technical differences, I'm sure, but the general like use case and what a user or builder would try to accomplish is the same, and that's communicating data between two different state machines. And for us with Moonbeam in particular, we use Moonbeam the same way we use Gateway. Moonbeam is kind of a router chain for liquidity for us. So instead of the higher infrastructure overhead of us connecting to every single app chain, because our validators deploy full nodes, we can connect to one, and then we can utilize Moonbeam as a router. And then once we're in the app chain, the Polkadot ecosystem, we can utilize XCM. So you're able to compose through a series of relays, essentially, and maybe some smart contract abstraction. You can compose, for instance, if I'm a user staring at, let's say, a swap widget or a bridge widget, I can go from ETH to parachain. And in what's happening in the background is you're going ETH to Moonbeam via Wormhole, and then you're going Moonbeam to, I don't know, name your app chain. I think in this instance, Hydra is the one, via XCM. So that's kind of the TLDR. Maybe that wasn't a TLDR, but hopefully that's helpful.
All right. Thanks for that. And to the big question, why is Wormhole now betting on Cosmos?
I mean, I think, and Nikhil can probably answer this better than I can, but it originally started with the Cosmos SDK and what it could provide us in terms of like, at the core, we set out to build this chain for security features. And so when we looked around, Cosmos made the most sense, but I'll let Nikhil elaborate a little bit more as to maybe the why there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
So I
sorry,
guess,
let me rephrase that question. So Wormhole supported Terra before it supported something like the Cosmos Hub or the wider Cosmos ecosystem in general. So what changed?
yeah, I guess I can pick this up as well. Just starting, it is related to us working on a Cosmos SDK chain. I think so. Starting from the beginning, the original alpha around Gateway is that it was originally called Worm Chain, and if you go into the code base and look at the Wormhole code base, you'll see references to Worm Chain all over the place. But Gateway was originally conceived as a blockchain that the Guardians could use to keep state on all the things that are happening in the Wormhole ecosystem for security features like the accountant. And so Gateway is running today. It's live. It's a proof of authority chain where there are 19 validators, and those 19 validators are the 19 Wormhole Guardians. And we built the account, and as we got more and more sort of into working with Cosmos and more comfortable with the Cosmos ecosystem and building this Cosmos chain, we started thinking about other features that we could add to Gateway that would be really valuable. And the first feature that we thought of adding that would be really valuable is what we're launching soon, which is the Wormhole Gateway token bridging. We were looking at the Cosmos ecosystem, and we thought that one of the most valuable things we could bring to the Cosmos ecosystem is liquidity from foreign chains, from all of the chains that Wormhole is already connected to. Like Cosmos is a super, super strong ecosystem technically, but bringing liquidity can help grow the ecosystem a lot more. And we could bring liquidity to the Cosmos ecosystem via Wormhole Gateway in a way that would be scalable for the Wormhole Guardians, since they could connect via IBC to all of the chains in the Cosmos, and also in a way that would be fungible and not fragment liquidity, because liquidity tokens would enter through Gateway, and then from Gateway would be routed from one Cosmos chain to another Cosmos chain. And we could configure all of our UIs and applications so that when users want to bridge Wormhole tokens from a Cosmos chain to another Cosmos chain, it gets routed back through Wormhole Gateway. So that's kind of the what and why, like why we're building in Cosmos. And also, I mean, like IBC is a powerful technology to build with. IBC is what enables us to do all of this. And so building along IBC is a valuable thing to do.
I'm inferring here about why it is that you guys decided to launch as your own Cosmos chain, right? Is it that because of the new security measures you needed to take after the first hack, the $325 million hack, that you decided that a chain to track all this transaction activity was needed in order for you to become more secure? Like how was Wormhole designed before Gateway?
Yeah, I can. Or go ahead, Nico.
Yeah, sure. I can start, and maybe Bronson, you can add context. But I mean, before Gateway, there was the Guardians were just there was no sort of accountant security feature. The Guardians were reliant on non-state storing security features. So, for example, the governor, Guardians would track governor limits for amounts that were bridged in and out themselves. And then we would have the shutdown contracts that the Guardians could, when they come to consensus on whether or not to shut down an ecosystem because of a hack that is socialized really well.
Yeah, and I think like speaking very specifically to, right, like the the chain allows us to have a ledger to store state, so the global accountant works. So one of those security features, and then it also helps us to unify the actual fungibility coming into Cosmos. It's also cheaper, right, from an infrastructure perspective. So when we connect to a new chain, we run full nodes, and that can be more expensive or take more time. So there's three like really core reasons. And then from a native asset issuance perspective, right? If I want to natively issue my asset, let's say, I don't know, on TBTC, WBTC, obviously USDC is doing with Noble, but like what's better than an island, let's say, where you can issue your asset and then have, all roads kind of lead to Rome type situation. So there was a number of reasons, but I'd say like the two initial were definitely a place to store state for security. And then instead of connecting to each chain and having this non-fungibility issue, which we talk a lot about, we have like, it's almost like a funnel. You can think about it for all fungibility.
Are you worried at all about the transparency that a public ledger lends to an attacker? So they would understand that your threshold is exactly how much was the threshold for drawing out is exactly what was bridged in. So they would know that number exactly. And let's say they just mint fake USDC up to that threshold because they know exactly what that is and then bridge it out.
I'll let Nikhil answer, but I mean, the majority of blockchains and a lot of the code is public. Wormhole as well is completely open source. So applying that logic is difficult because I could say like, well, being completely open source or being able to see like activity on chain maybe makes it easier for a hacker to do something.
I believe it does.
Maybe, yeah, you're exactly right. But I also think it's important for us to maintain, to be open source, maintain transparency, so people know what's happening under the hood with Wormhole. But Nikhil, I don't know if you want to add any context.
Yeah, I think transparency in crypto kind of go hand in hand, I think. And transparency is kind of what you alluded to, Django, is like it can be a blessing and a curse, right? Like it can be a curse because all the code is open source, right? And an attacker can see exactly what's going on. An attacker can see all the values, can see all the balances, all the limits. But it's also a blessing because anyone can, because it's a decentralized system. Everyone can verify the code that they're running. Everyone can verify the software that they're running. Everyone can independently check whether things are right or whether they are wrong. And as we see on crypto Twitter every day, people aren't just using the transparency of like crypto to hack crypto. People are using the transparency of crypto to understand how the crypto ecosystem is working and who is doing what. And people use the transparency of the crypto ecosystem to catch hacks as they are happening, which I think is really important too. And so I think transparency and crypto just go hand in hand, and it's a blessing and a curse, and we try to leverage it as much as possible as a blessing.
Okay. Closing questions. What are you most excited to see with new Cosmos support?
New Cosmos support?
I mean, with Gateway now supporting the Interchain ecosystem, what sorts of use cases are you excited to see your users doing?
Yeah, I think all of the, the biggest like wormhole use cases for token bridging for the Gateway product that we're launching, bridging tokens in and out, obviously building dApps and composing dApps on top of token bridging. So building cross-chain swaps, building cross-chain borrow-lend protocols, building cross-chain money market protocols, all sorts of native cross-chain DeFi applications that have to do with token bridging, I think are really, really exciting. Cross-chain wallets, all these things. And then moving beyond just like token bridging, Wormhole is a general message passing protocol. And so seeing more use cases, more exciting use cases of just general message passing, bridging data, not just tokens. And then the other thing I'm really excited for is there's a Interchain NFT standard that's being hammered out right now, and that'll enable us to bring NFT bridging into the Cosmos as well via Gateway, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think Nikhil covered a lot of it, but the way I think about it is that number one, there's going to be more ecosystems interested in Cosmos. For instance, Bonk is going to be coming to Osmosis, and when Bonk, the token comes, usually you get some of the community, crazy ideas, fun and dApps, things like that. And then also
Bonk, is that the dog coin of Solana?
That's the dog coin of Solana. You're correct.
Why is it called Bonk?
That's not a question for me, but maybe you can ask them on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, just Cosmos will be included in a lot of these, like what we call like cross-chain native applications. So a borrow lend that, maybe has assets, you have your ETH, ARB, OP, and right next to it is, I don't know, your Neutron, Osmo, et cetera. And then access to other ecosystems they haven't had before, Sui, Aptos, Near, things like that. So, and then the last thing, I'm excited to see what the next native asset that's issued and who's going to do it on Gateway. We have USDC now, we have USDT, I guess we have WBTC. What's next?
Anything you can share?
No, there's nothing yet. But if anyone's considering, this is a plug, a shameless plug, in fact.
Yeah. So is it are you expecting Wormhole to be a large source of native liquidity in the interchain?
100%. Yeah. I think like that's one of our biggest, the biggest things we're focusing on now, and why we're partnering with Osmosis too, is kind of at least a center for IBC transfers. I think they top the charts, and they have pretty good liquidity. So we're focusing on working with them initially and bringing a lot of assets. Right now, we're bringing assets in from non-EVM to give Cosmos users access to assets and chains they haven't had yet.
Such as?
And then such as Solana, such as Sui, such as Aptos, Near. None of those, to my knowledge, have been able to be accessed if you're only Cosmos native, let's say. Never do anything on Ethereum. But asset transfer coming into the ecosystem is one of the things we're most focused on.
Naturally. Great. We're going to close up with some housekeeping questions. Are there timelines that people should take note of about certain exciting milestones coming up?
Wormhole Gateway is launching. Gateway token bridging is launching very, very soon. So stay on the lookout. That's the biggest milestone that we have coming up.
Yeah, that's a big milestone. Well, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're focused a lot on ZK, so you'll continue to see us prioritize what we call ZK corridors, or connections between chains that are attested to via ZK verification. So there should be a few of those announcements, but I think we have a large focus right now on Gateway, a large focus right now on decentralizing our contributor set. So we've got 5 teams building Wormhole now. And then, ZK. There'll be obviously other announcements too, but those are the main ones.
Would your ZK verification research lend itself to bolstering the security of the chain that comes with the transparency?
So maybe not the chain directly, and Nikhil, keep me honest, but transfers to the chain, yeah. So like if we go from Ethereum to Gateway, right, that's a much more, let's say, trust minimized corridor now. So anything coming into the Cosmos would benefit from that.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would add to that is, if I'm understanding your question correctly, but generally I feel, the kind of work we do and the research we do, we try to always give back to the community in some way, or try to improve the community as a whole in some way. Like the work we do in security, we don't just do security work for Wormhole, we do security work, as Robinson mentioned, for like all the connected chains and projects that Wormhole is connected to. And we found bugs in those projects. We found a lot of bugs in Cosmos, and we reported those responsibly disclose those to like projects that we found those bugs in. Same with ZK. Part of ZK is standardizing how you structure and abstract away consensus mechanisms. And I'm sure there's a lot of research that's going to be valuable to the ecosystem that comes out of that. Same with the work we've done in Cosmos. We've learned a lot using IBC, pulling in Cosmos modules, using relayers, building our own Cosmos chain. So there's a lot that we can give back to the Cosmos community as well after Gateway has been launched.
Okay. Looking forward to the ZK research that we could use downstream. Hopefully.
Cool.
All right, great. Well, thank you too for coming on Interchain FM. If you as a listener are going to Stanford Blockchain Conference, say hi to me because I will be there. And yeah, congrats for staying with us all the way to the very end. Everyone who listens to the show is an alpha seeker. I know this because we're deep in the depths of a bear market and they're still here. So yeah, just as a reminder, if you are delegated to Interchain FM, thank you so much for supporting our work. This is a completely public goods funded, well, it's not fun. It's a completely a public good that is to share alpha with you far and wide across the Interchain ecosystem and across the whole interoperability sector for that matter. And if you've been following our progress on Suit Drop, that is coming imminently. We're getting the front end tested and it'll be deployed, and we're going to put up the third and final governance contract on the Osmosis chain. So look out for that. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just look up Suit Drop on crypto Twitter, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.